Now we come to our Muppet of the Month, and this is a strange one, in so much as this is actually, unfortunately, the second time that we've picked this individual as a Muppet. Uh, the, this is not for partisan reasons. This is simply because he seemingly is, well, all evidence points to the fact that he's a bit Muppety at times. And
You could call this. You could say that he's a two-time winner.
a two-time winner,
He'd like.
two-time winner.
He'd see it like that.
He's a
Yeah,
winner. He's a
two-time winner.
winner. Um,
Absolutely.
and this is, of course, the President of the United States, number 45, Donald Trump himself. And initially, we were going to pick him as the Muppet of the Month for getting some history wrong. Ha ha! The story from USA Today on the 11th of August was that Trump erroneously says 1918 Spanish flu probably ended World War II, which is a bit of a forehead slapper. World War II obviously was not in 1918. In fact, he actually said 1917. The quote was, the closest thing is 1917, they say. The Great Pandemic. It certainly was a terrible thing where they lost anywhere from 50 to 100 million people. Probably ended the Second World War, Trump said. All the soldiers were sick, and that was a terrible situation. And we were going to have a bit of a titter. The president doesn't know when the Second World War was, and yet at the same time, if one is a bit addled and confused, one can see how it is possible to maybe get a slip of the tongue, World War One, World War Two, but also actually there was illness floating around the battlefields of the Great War. There's something in there. It was a low level light Muppet in that sense, wasn't it, initially? Um, but then on the day of recording, when we were recording the first two-thirds of this watching brief, eagle-eyed viewers may have noticed that we are recording the last couple of segments on a different day. Um,
You have just blown the train ticket. There was me, the broadcasting professional. I'm wearing the same shirt I was the other day because for continuity reasons,
I
in
know.
case you just wanted to edit it
Yeah.
all together, and
I know. Yeah.
you
Me
go and
too.
blow the
Me
whole
too.
thing to our viewer.
Yeah, we're both professionals, but I couldn't resist. In so much as I think it matters, the timeline matters. Um,
It
so on
does
the day that
matter.
we were recording, something happened, and that was so-called hashtag soupgate, which obviously I couldn't resist getting involved in. Archaeosoup, we had to. And this was well, what's been described as a ramble, possibly a rant, at a NAPO event, which not only is recorded but also is part of as you were saying, the White House transcript. This is official,
Yeah,
like absolutely, he said this,
it's
where
not fake news. It
it
happened.
happens.
He said this to senior police officers.
um, where he was suggesting to those people that a lot of people don't know how soup is so dangerous. People will be carrying soup to Antifa demonstrations, and they'll say it's just soup for the family when they're challenged. But no, no, it's a weapon. They're going to throw it at the police. It's more dangerous than bricks. Apparently, bricks are very hard to throw, according to the president. Um, ask,
Apparently, you can turn if you fold it correctly, you could turn packets of soup into one of these sort of ninja throwing star
You could
things.
do, you could do. To be fair, ask the police service or the army, in fact, in 1980s Northern Ireland, whether or not a brick is hard to throw.
Well, quite.
Yeah. But anyway, apparently soup is dangerous, and I had to get involved. Archaeosoup, and you and I, we jointly composed a tweet, which I was actually quite proud of. Hashtag Soupgate. I disavow any knowledge of this. Archaeosoup may contain human remains, but we would like to reassure POTUS, at Real Donald Trump, that it is indeed soup for the family. For it is for nourishing the brain, not for hurling at law enforcement officials. And that was going to be a little add-on, not quite historical or archaeological, but a little bit of soup added on to that initial Muppet of the Month.
Actually, yeah, absolutely. Just to remind our viewer, you've got it on the shelf behind you. The Archaeosoup offensive weapon. There is a soup test ban treaty currently in force. Apparently,
Yeah, exactly. You just need to keep a lid on it and hold. Yeah, keep it safe. Um,
absolutely.
but then, unfortunately, as of this morning, I woke up to news that broke overnight in the United States of something which is very serious and that does have a direct relationship to our interests, history and heritage, and also actually some of the most important roles that historians play. Um, for some people, history is a succession of events, often a succession of battles, and it is important to mark those battles with respect and with solemn solemnity, so that we might never forget people who died in those events. Um, Also, as well, uh, rituals are a sort of a procession of repeated acts of, for example, remembrance. The ritual roles that people play, especially our leaders play, in helping us to commemorate those events and those fallen people are important. They're at the centre often of portions of the national psyche. Here in the United Kingdom, we have the cenotaph in London, which was erected as part of armistice to commemorate the war dead for the First World War. And every year we gather there, and our nation's figurehead, the leader of the armed services, it is Her Majesty's Army, the Queen, um, leads as the mourner in chief, for want of a better word, the nation in remembering the dead in a solemn and respectful way, in a non-partisan way, in a way which is separate from the moment. This is almost like this is almost an immortal act, as it were. This is a milestone of history. In that context, it's important that it was reported overnight by the Atlantic magazine um, that during the events of the 2018 commemoration of the end of the First World War, as those events were sort of coming to a crescendo, there were rumours floating around on the rolling news that, for example, Donald Trump didn't attend commemorations at graves for American war dead. He didn't go to the largest cemetery for American soldiers because it was raining. Now, rumours had it that this was because he didn't want his hair to suffer in the weather. Um, but the official word put out by the press office at the White House was that it was because the helicopter couldn't fly in the rain. Presumably, Marine One couldn't fly in the rain.
Thereby telling all the enemies of the United States that if you want to take down American capitalism, attack when it's raining.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, precisely. In the winter, America shall fall.
Yeah.
And this was strange, and but it was what it was. But this has been shown not only to be the case based on multiple sources. The case that actually Donald was vain enough to not want to go out in the rain, but also that he's described American war dead as losers and suckers. Now, I actually find it quite hard to go into this in too much detail because it's quite upsetting. So, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, I do, because I think this is a very important piece of work. It's an article by Jeffrey Goldberg for the Atlantic magazine, as you explained. Um, Now, normally in journalism, you want to have, particularly for any kind of story, let alone a contentious story like this, at least two sources. This is multiply sourced, at least four. Now, some people have criticised the article for being based on anonymous sources, but that is to misunderstand how journalism works. Journalists have a duty to protect sources, or they stop being sources and they get fired, or in some cases they get arrested. So, that it's perfectly normal journalistic practice to use anonymous sources. When this dropped onto my Twitter feed last night, I read it, and I read it as a very responsible, very well sourced, very cool actually article. But I mean, jaw dropping is
Cool-headed,
used as a cliche. Cool headed,
yeah.
yeah, cool headed. Jaw dropping is used far too much these days. Yeah, we live in very strange times, but not everything is a jaw dropping moment. This is a jaw dropping moment, because what Jeffrey Goldberg has done is go to people who were clearly witnesses to these events, because he puts things in direct quotes. He puts what Trump said in direct quotes. And it is absolutely devastating for any pretense that the President of the United States can be that uniting national figurehead at times of great stress and distress, or at times of very solemn remembrance. Um, to, I mean, we've posted the link, and I urge people to go and read this. But for example, the case you stated was the cemetery at Belle-Wood in France, which is the resting place for around 1,800 members of the United States Marine Corps. The Battle of Belle-Wood in the First World War is an iconic battle in the history of the Marine Corps. And yet Trump, it's put in quotes, referred to those dead Marines as, quotes, suckers because they were killed. And he's
suckers who, in the history of that very honourable corps, were famous, and whether or not it's just a slight sort of a mythology, who went forward and held ground at a point when other forces, for example the French forces who were there, were retreating.
Absolutely.
They learned a great lesson in that battle of how to fight in the First World War, and it is a crucial part of the Marine Corps' identity. And for their commander-in-chief, never mind which party he belongs to say that they were suckers, it beggars belief.
It beggars belief. But the thing that is, I think, the most upsetting moment from the point of view of personal feelings is a paragraph where obviously the United States equivalent of our Remembrance Sunday is Memorial Day, and on Memorial Day 2017, Trump, as the president, as the mourner-in-chief, as the representative of the American people and the Constitution, went to which American service personnel swear allegiance. They don't swear allegiance to the president as British service personnel do to the Queen. Americans swear to uphold the Constitution, and the focus for that is Arlington National Cemetery. It's the American equivalent, really, of the cenotaph for those moments of very solemn remembrance. 2017, Trump is there with his then Chief of Homeland Security, who is about to become his Chief of Staff, John Kelly. And they visit a grave in section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery. And it's John Kelly's son, Robert, who was killed in action in Afghanistan at the age of 29. And this is meant to, you'd expect this to be a moment of great companionship and support and sympathy
between professional friends,
between professionals and colleagues, absolutely. And in this moment of the most, the most solemn event of the ceremonial year in America, in Washington. And it's in direct quotes. Trump turns to Kelly, the grieving father, at the grave of his son, and says, "I don't get it. What was in it for them?" The idea, and one of the key ideas in the whole article, and perhaps I should just take a moment so our audience can actually take in the implication of that. I don't get it. What was in it for them? This is somebody who sees existence, your relationship with others, your relationship with the country, as purely transactional. If there's nothing in it for you, why should you bother? If you do something that there's nothing in it for you, you're a sucker. It is. I suppose in some respects, it's desperately sad that somebody could have a complete. I mean, people have talked about the president's mental state and the president's personality and whether he has a narcissistic personality disorder and so on. But you read something like this, and it's just deeply, deeply sad and bleak, actually.
I very quickly went from disgust and frustration, essentially, to pitying this person, because and that's not a position that you want the president, the president of the United States to be in, is to be someone who elicits pity. But I do, in so much as he's also quoted as asking who were the good guys. Who was in this war? Who were the good guys? I think it was the First World War he was referring to.
Yes.
Who were the good guys, Mr. President? Your guys. Even if one wants to be really cynical and suggest that America, in some of her conflicts, has maybe been on the wrong side of history. Even if one wants to suggest that, for you, Mr. President, your guys are the good guys, always. And to ask that is just, as I say, it's pitiful, pitiful.
And,
So go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say, there's one last thing I'd say on this, and again, I do urge our audience, our viewers, to go and read this article. It's an astonishing piece of work. How important it'll be in the context of the American general election, it's too early to say. Trump has, brushed off things like the tape where he described his attitude to women, approaching
Grabbing
women for a
genitalia.
start.
Mhm.
Grabbing certain pieces of genitalia. But this goes right to the heart of America's relationship with its military, and even more so than in this country, America holds its military in utmost respect for the most part.
Mhm.
So this is potentially explosive. But I think the thing that tempers my sympathy for Trump as a clearly damaged personality
I don't have sympathy. I
is,
pity him.
yeah, is the fact that he's also, again, one of the motifs of his presidency has been wanting to glory in the military, but only so far. So, for example, he stages raids because Obama staged raids. And so on. But one of the things that he's wanted, after visiting France on Bastille Day and seeing the Bastille Day parade, where the French armed forces parade down the Champs Elysees in front of the president, he wanted a military parade in Washington, but only so far, because although he claimed to have utmost respect and to have attended the homecoming of the coffins of slain American personnel, that stopped. And in a planning meeting in 2018, planning for a military parade in Washington, Trump it is said, asked his staff not to include wounded veterans in the parade, which is routine in Britain. And he asked that on the grounds that spectators will feel uncomfortable in the presence of amputees. And again, in quotes, nobody wants to see that. In other words, he's prepared to take the to promote the propaganda element, but he's not prepared to have the consequences of those decisions, his decisions, seen in public, and that's cowardice.
It is cowardice. It is, and it plays into another quote here from an officer with first-hand knowledge of what Trump said. Um, he said that the president has a lot of fear, and he doesn't see heroism in fighting. Now the thing is, I just want to quickly put this into a couple of contexts. First of all, if this was Obama saying this, if this was George W. Bush saying this, I would be equally appalled. This is the office as the president. This is not about the party. I don't give a monkeys whether he's red, blue, purple, or green. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
It's the
We've got
office.
no skin in that. We've got no skin in that
No,
game.
no, at all. Um, the second thing as well is that I have on this channel on Archaeosoup, I have in the past made a video called "Britain Needs to Stop Its Second World War Obsession." At the beginning of which I make it extremely explicitly clear that I'm not talking about armistice and remembrance. Armistice and remembrance and honouring the dead, the war dead in particular, who gave their last full measure. All these very important ideas is sacred. It's very important. It's extremely important. And actually, this man demonstrates the importance of that when he gets to a point of asking who are the good guys here. There's a difference, though, between actual, active, accurate, I would say, accurate remembrance and remembering what happened, to whom it happened, how it happened, when it happened, where it happened, and mythologizing a conflict. And again, this man is demonstrating some of the worst aspects of mythologizing the military machine, and wanting the prestige of the power that engenders, and that may well, project across the world, without, as you say, wanting the responsibility. The office that he holds is responsible for sending men and women to die abroad. and the decisions that they make, obviously, often, soldiers are not immune to the notion, to the, to the reality that often they're embroiled in essentially political agendas. There are reasons why the US went to here and there and the other throughout the past 50, 60 years, but they don't question that. Their duty is to go fight and in some cases die. And it's his duty to honour that, and also to take responsibility for the fact that what he's looking at is is something that his office has been involved in, and that his actions will result in. He it as I say, it beggars belief. I mean, and I don't often, I can engage in remembrance, for example, without tearing up. I can be quite solemn and stoic about this stuff, but this kind of behaviour, as reported, just makes me very upset, and uh, I'm not really sure where to go from that, from there in terms of this segment. So I mean, we should probably bring it to a close. But short to say, I suppose this segment represents a man blundering his way through history, and that's the reason why we're commenting on it. We're talking about it in terms of his relationship to history and our connected relationship to history. Britain and America have fought shoulder to shoulder in many of these conflicts. Um, and we love history and archaeology. This is why we do what we do, and a big part of that is to help us remember these people.
Yeah, yeah. I'd make one last comment really, and that is that certainly in my view, history isn't something to use for its propaganda value, because it's not a fixed. It's not a fixed thing. It's a constantly moving, constantly evolving thing. We have to reflect that. That's our job as historians and so on. It can't and mustn't ever be a comfort blanket. But that part of
You can
what
take
we
pride
do
in
that
it. You can take pride in
we
it.
can take
But
absolutely. You
yes,
can take and you can respect the individual threads. Without misrepresenting it as a comfort blanket, and I think that's what's going on here.